Hey, it's Joel Mark Witt coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Beautiful, sunny Los Angeles. I'd love to live here. This is so fantastic. We just finished a 5-day profiler training event. And what we're gonna do right now is shoot into a video between one of our profiler training students, who's now become our certification coach, Melissa, who does a live profiling session with a young woman named Sophia. And it's really cool to see Melissa do this live profiling session in front of a whole audience of people at our live profiler training event. And I think you're gonna really dig this. So watch how Melissa, one of our students, goes through a profiling session and how she helps Sophia determine her personality type live in front of a studio audience.
What do you love to do so much that you could pretty much go on indefinitely? It gives you energy even to do this thing, and anything you say is the right answer, and through all of this, that's the case. Doesn't matter, I just want to know how you think.
I have planned for this for 5 years. I think I would have had a very inarticulate answer to the flow question if it had been asked to me the first time I heard it and I had to give an answer, but going through this content and having a chance to synthesize it, my answer is role-playing. I think that is all of the things that I can do until I am physically exhausted somehow link back to that concept.
Wow. So can you tell me more about the concept?
Absolutely. Well, in a very literal sense, since graduating 4 years ago from undergrad, I began playing tabletop RPGs. Which I had admired from a distance for most of my life, being a very satisfied and comfortable nerd. I mean this sincerely to the core of my being, I did not think I was cool enough to play tabletop RPGs. But I loved it, and what I love about it is creating a character and understanding how that character thinks and navigating it in a fantasy world or whatever setting it is. I mean, I guess it is inherently fantastical in that it's imagined. But that is just thrilling to me. It's like getting to practice being a human. And I love interacting with other people's characters. That's like practicing interacting with other humans. And that it just feels safer than actually doing that in real life. And I think that experience, and I'm kind of realizing this as I say it now, sparked a lot of my own personal growth. It was like practicing, and I don't always, and in fact, I often don't make characters that are like me. But they always have something that I'm pulling out from inside of me in them as the starting point. And then looking further back in my history, I loved reading. I think that if you had asked like middle school Sophie the flow question, she would have said reading, absolutely. I was the type of child that took a book to the dinner table and mom was like, you have to focus and be here right now and you have to stop. And I also got really into fan fiction as a middle schooler and high schooler. And that too really to me is a form of role play. It's about getting into the brain of someone else's creation and doing the in between the lines that isn't in the original source material. It's getting to flesh out what you think might happen between these two characters or this character in a situation that you'd never actually get to see them in. And that was always, that's what got me hooked into TV shows or books, was that connective piece of all the things that the characters might do.
Can you tell me, I don't really even know what fan fiction is.
Fan fiction is, so I feel like a common fandom is Harry Potter. So it's some sort of franchise with characters, it could be a movie, it could be a book. And fan fiction is when you take those characters and write pieces, speculative usually, about, here's what these two people would do in the situation. It is very strongly relationship focused, usually. I feel like most people who are attracted to fan fiction are doing it from the lens of what if these two characters were in love, and what would their relationship be like? And I certainly did my share of that. Oh, I ate that up. Absolutely. I'm not gonna lie. It was online. Never, like, I did not have friends who we read each other's fan fiction. Maybe one or two. But of course, the person that it got shared with all the time and for whom I usually wrote was my twin. Like, we were our own audience, and actually, I kind of got out of that when I got into RPGs because that filled the void. I think it met all of the needs that was fulfilling for me of imagining worlds, and it was even better because it was mine, finally. But it didn't feel as vulnerable as like writing my own novel or pretentious. You know, like it's play. It's a role-playing game. Even though I can take it very seriously. But so as I've gotten back into fan fiction writing since then, I don't post it online. It's just for me and Hannah. And it's still really satisfying to me. I love to go back and read my old works and reimagine those situations or like add nuance to them, or sometimes it inspires me to like write a new story. But
that is so cool. So it sounds to me like when you're doing this, it gives you a chance to just let your imagination go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And can you maybe contrast that, or maybe compare that to real life, not imagination life? Like, how do you feel like you fit into the normal world?
Well, I think it's interesting because I probably spend most of my time imagining how I would fit into the normal world. I run a lot of scenarios around like, okay, you're going to go to the grocery store today because you have no food in your house and you have to eat. What types of things might you run into? Like, there's going to be people there. So, am I going to, like, I need to decide now, like, what if someone says hello to me? Am I going to say hello back? Am I going to be really, like, stoic today and just nod? Do I want to go out into the world today smiling? What might be the side effects of that? What if someone engages me in conversation because I smiled at them? What if someone hits on me because I smiled on them and suddenly I'm getting asked for my phone number? And so, like, I think that I role play real life. I feel like I am a character that I control and I role play myself.
Wow.
Which is another reason that calibration is hard, because I have to ask, I'm like, is this me? Is this authentically me, or is this a character that I've crafted to fit my context?
Wow, that is fascinating. So tell me, how do you do when you, not just going to the store, but other real life situations, like a school? What was elementary school like? Like what would your 5th grade teacher, if I said, do you remember Sophia? What was she like?
She would be like, oh, she was just the sweetest girl. I feel like I get that feedback a lot from teachers. They were just like, she's so good. She's so quiet. And it's because I was quiet, and I sat and I watched what was going on in the classroom, and I like to sit, even though I have an instinct of fear, to sit in the back in case I need to flee. I enjoy sitting in the front because I like to get right in there and make eye contact with the teacher, and I'm like, look at me, like, give this information to me because I'm listening to you. I like to do that here. I was like, Joel and Antonia, I'm right here whenever you need me. I am right here. I am listening to you. And I think that a little bit of that is because it's what I would want if I was, like, I would want someone to, like, anchor myself to. And then I did my work because it felt like life or death. You know, like, school to me, as I've been processing it, I did not pursue graduate studies, which surprised most people in my life. And even people who are very close to me, you know, like my father. And it surprised me a little bit too, and I think a lot of my very close friends, and it was because I was burnt out and jaded incredibly jaded. I think the education minor was a part of that. I think an education major can brainwash you, and an education minor just like breaks the spell. Like suddenly you see everything that's wrong with our education system. And it was terrible. I was like, I cannot teach. I can't. They will eat me alive, and they have every right to. If I can't stand before a group of people and pretend to be an expert in something, even if it's something that I've studied for 8 years. That's not enough time. So I worked very hard in school, and I had to. I don't feel like there were many subjects that I was naturally brilliant in. I was also in, and it's hard for me to say that I was a good student, but objectively, I have to confess, I was a very good student, and it was because I did exactly what was expected of me. I learned what the expectations were, and I learned the line of like, where is it impressive to exceed an expectation, and where is it not a good idea to exceed an expectation, and delivered exactly that. I feel like that's the biggest thing I learned in college, was that there is no perfect way to write a paper. You were writing for your professor. You had to learn them and deliver to them what they wanted. That was absolutely what it was. I was like, it doesn't matter if I think I'm good at writing or not. At all. Or if anyone does.
So is that a natural, is it easy for you to tell what someone else wants?
I think with time and study, I have to observe them, and I also have to see other people, like their response to, I do a little bit of testing, and I watch other people test, really. And I think that's why I like to be quiet in the classroom, is because I like to see other people answer and see how it goes. And then I get an impression of like, okay, this is how I could do this well, or better.
Wow, so interesting. I'm gonna like just pause a little bit for just a second and say, so if I wanted to, I could go down the road and say, how much alone time do you need to feel like yourself? Or I could say, which is more of a nightmare? But I feel like, and if I would have gotten one thing from her, if she would have said, oh yeah, they would have said, she's a sweet, quiet, good student. And that was all I got, that wouldn't have been enough, just because she said the word quiet. But it's like she's showing me, not telling me. And she's not like answering a question I asked about, like let's say that she has an idea in her mind, like, I'm an ISTP, and it's romantic to her to be that type, and so she's like introvert. She's not trying to plant words in this to show me that she's a quiet introvert, alone, etc. She her whole life, the things that she loves to do are things that she does alone. Like when she talks about her flow state is alone, and her when she talked about reading's another thing she loves. And she was sweet and quiet and good at school, and she likes to sit in the front because she wants the info. That's listening. She's not, I like to sit in the front so that I can engage and talk to the teachers more. So I just got like many confirmations of introvert. And I usually don't waste time going on and then asking another question. And I almost feel like it can break rapport when we're just having a conversation and I'm genuinely interested, and then I go back to the tester mode and ask her a question. There's no reason to do that. So just pointing that out. Now you know. Now you know the inner working. You don't have to guess the inner workings of my mind now. You know. So I'd love to know what you said. School, you did have to work hard.
Yes.
And why did you bother?
Because it felt like my whole identity, my whole state of mind hinged on positive feedback that I was a good student. That was my source of value. And that is why it has been very destabilizing, but incredible to not be in a school setting right now. And to kind of divorce from that specific contextualized definition of a student. I very much resonate with the identity of a student in that I think that really it's not about being a student, it's about being a learner, which are two different things to me. Being a student is what I got burnt out on. Being a learner is something that I think probably everybody in this room identifies as. You know, that's why we're here.
So what about being a student is more exhausting than being a learner?
It was the expectations and the, like, that I think that I kind of trapped myself in that identity and made it about this, like, hit of, like, well, I just don't know how good I am at anything unless I get a grade that is the top of the class or approximately close to that. Because there were, like, I was in the top 10%. My high school was, like, at the time that I was there, ranked 11th in the nation. And then I went on to not a like program within a state school because of cost that was like all people of similar context that were like, well, I can't afford to go to an Ivy League, but here I am here. And plenty of my, like some of my closest friends from high school did go on, and that was like an ego hit to me. You know, I was like, I've never been them, and I'm not them, but they were my, you know, like I hung out with them.
Yeah.
we were close. And yeah, I think it was the fact that like my whole sense of value around myself was tied to getting that good grade, even if it wasn't the best. That was okay. I could settle for that, but it had to be A's.
Yeah. And is that something that is just intrinsic to you, or were your parents?
No, oh my God, not at all. I think they would have done anything to get me to stop wigging out about that. And what's interesting, so I have my twin. I have a sister who's 18 months younger than us. My parents divorced, and both of them remarried, and we've all stayed very close. So I have a half-sister and half-brother who are a junior and freshman in college, and a half-sister who is 13. All of us are like this. And it does not at all come from our parents. Our parents are all very, like, they just were like, do whatever you want to, you know, like, be whatever you want to, like, they just held space for us to do what we wanted, and what we wanted to do when we were given that space was to succeed. And I think that it's gotten probably like increasingly unhealthy down the sibling line, which is interesting for me as the old, like I wish that I could help like our only brother, my half brother who's a freshman right now, who I feel like is making serious sacrifices in his life, like his social life. You know, I don't think he has any friends, and that was not me. You know, like I had friends. They were just all very interested in succeeding like me, so we had plenty in common and a lot, you know, yeah. It wasn't an interference. So that like troubles me. I see in my siblings something that was like a balance that was difficult for me to find, and I don't know how to help them find that balance, or maybe their balance is just different. You know, like maybe that's okay for him, but it wouldn't have been for me. I would have been miserable if I didn't have a social context. And I think especially a social context that like we had these types of conversations. I've had these types of conversations my whole life with my family, in all of my academic settings, and honestly, I think otherwise I would be very closed off. I feel safe here because it's familiar to me. That I'm like, oh, this is like talking with my friends or talking with my family. It's like talking to my sister.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. More about your social group. They're all like achiever kind of people, and then among those people, what was your role? So there was a stark change in my junior year of high school. The people who from middle school into high school, the high school that I attended to there was a middle school that fed into it, and you had to get into the middle school on a lottery system. Twins rode on one ticket. We were very lucky.
And I was totally okay with that. It didn't bother me at all that we weren't being treated as separate people. I had that group of friends from middle school into high school, but in junior year, I think, is probably when my jadedness with being a student and with academia began. And that was kind of, it was just like a natural break where I think I started to focus more and more on the meaning I was getting from having, like, interacting with other people, and less on, like, let's achieve, you know, like, I've got to be at the top and I have these goals about where I see and I'm like, I'm going to be at this college and I'm going to be doing this job. I didn't have any of that. I always was kind of like, yeah, I could be a French teacher probably, or teach English in a French-speaking country. The reason that I studied French was because it was the path of least resistance. I had already done it in middle school. I studied it for 4 years in high school because it was interesting to me. I originally studied it because I have French-speaking family in North Africa, and I wanted to learn it so that I could speak with them. It was fascinating, and I really loved other elements of it that weren't related to that practical use, but I did not want to go to grad school for that at all. And I feel like that was kind of in opposition to, like, the friend group that ended up being the valedictorian and salutatorian, who they were just so busy, and they were focusing on, you know, like, padding their college applications with things that were going to help them succeed down the path that they were seeing. And I didn't really see a clear path. I was just kind of like, well, we'll see where this goes. And it wasn't important to me to have a clear path, and I wasn't getting any enforcement from people whose opinions I valued, like my parents, that I had to. Particularly my mother and stepfather and dad and then stepmom, like, in that order of most do whatever you want to most, you know, like, what's the practical use of this? I'll just say this. I suspect that my stepmother is an ISTJ and not a very healthy one. And she's kind of been like an anomalous experience in my close personal life. And she is like the only person who had any sort of like authority over me, who would say things that were very jarring to me, like, well, what are you going to do with that? And I was like, what? What do you mean? I'm just doing it, which she appreciates, but that's not the first thing in her mind. Her first mind is like, well, what are you going to do with a French major? And I was like, what did you do with your theater major, Donna?
Nice.
I don't say that. I don't say that.
Because if you go home and why don't you try it and let us know how that goes?
Just see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll love that.
I'm sure she will.
Okay, so I'm going to pause again.
Yeah.
So I'm right now, like, I feel a little bit confused because for a while I was listening to her talk about outer world feedback and how important that was to her, and that I want my teachers to like me and to think that I'm doing a good job. And so I'm like, okay, that's an extroverted thing. And now she's talking about, like, yeah, French major might not be that practical, but that's what I did anyway. And I'm thinking, well, if she's like so interested in the outer world giving her feedback, maybe she would be thinking of doing the major that would impress the most people or that would get her the most money. So anyway, don't listen. So that's kind of like the road that I'm going down now. Is I want to reconcile that part of it because I'm genuinely a little bit thrown off by that. So I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So I am curious about, is it, when you make decisions typically, are you looking far down the line? Or are you just, like, what makes a decision be like, yep, that's what I'm going to do?
That is an excellent question.
Thank you.
And I am going to take a minute to root around and get that piece of information. So, I feel like one of the most recent big decisions that I made was coming to this and doing this course. And I'm going to talk through my thought process, and then maybe I'll know the answer too, because right now I'm like, I don't know. I was considering that, first off, on a very like practical level, I was like, this is financially ridiculous. It is so impractical. So impractical. It's ludicrous. And that, I think, is a value judgment that I make not because it's necessarily authentic to me. I think that our there's so much subliminal messaging that that's something that I have to keep track of, that I will. And use it as a way to get out of something that was a potentially uncomfortable experience for me for other reasons that are much more important to me than whether or not I have enough money to do them. And those reasons were about being like, and Hannah actually asked me this part of what made me choose to do it now, because I've thought about doing it for a long time, and I've thought about like, oh, well, I'll save up for it as a way of putting it off. She was like, so the live event, would you go to the live event? And I was like, absolutely, yes, I would. I would love to do it. It does sound terrifying to me, but I was like, that's why I think I would love to do it, is because it's so uncomfortable. That I just want to, learn to swim by throwing yourself into the deep end, which is actually how my ISTJ stepmother taught me how to swim.
Ironic. Fascinating.
She's a lifeguard, so it was okay.
Okay.
And the big question for me, the thing that made it really difficult to decide to do this or not to do this, was that I was like, why? Why do you want to do this? What is the purpose? What do you gain out of doing this other than fun? And does it matter if that's all that you get out of it? And I think that I've wanted to do it for a long time because I love the content. And actually, I'll just confess this while it's on my mind. I realized yesterday, I wrote this down as a note to myself, that I am having a visceral responsive fear to doing profiling exercises today and doing a profiling session tomorrow, to the extent that I am falling back into an old pattern of mine where I will just literally run away from something. I have thought about doing things that I'm like, Sophie, a person can't do that. You're not allowed to do. Yeah, I'm attached, I can't run. They tied me down. Yeah, I'm like, just don't show up. Just don't go, you don't have to. But I want to, because that's what I came to do. I came to have this experience, and even the aha that I had was, I don't think I actually want to profile. And that's okay. I think as soon as I gave myself permission to accept that truth about myself, I was like, then it doesn't, you have nothing to lose. That's why I was able to come, is because I determined you have nothing to lose. It actually feels good that I don't have some sort of practical application that I'm taking these skills to, because then I felt like I could be authentic to myself and show up in the most honest, transparent way, the way that I do to the people who are mapped into my inner experience. Like, this is it. This is me. This is finite. Like, this is, maybe I've reached like the bottom of or I have to think about it in terms of Minecraft, where like you get to the bedrock and that's it. But you can also glitch out and fall into a black void forever. And I'm like, I've either reached the bedrock or I'm in the black void and falling forever, and both of those are okay with me. They both mean the same thing to me, is that there's like a finiteness that I think I've kind of yearned for in my experience that otherwise can feel very infinite. Not in just a like, where it's all kind of an energetic ebb and flow and transient, but also permanent. And I wanted finiteness, and I think that's part that is kind of, I'm realizing this now, a metaphor for my relationship with my type, is that I want that finiteness, but I also like falling in the black void a lot, because it then you can always be in pursuit of something finite. And I think that I like that chase. A lot.
Wow. So I'm about to profile her as an ESTJ. I just have a...
And I'm going to say, that resonates with me so much.
So right, like, again, it continues to be very clear to me that she's an introvert. And it's very clear to me that she's an intuitive too. And sometimes I don't say that as quickly as maybe I might sometimes, because there are people who have intuition in the middle, like an ESTJ or like an ESFJ or ISFP or whatever. There's types that have that. You can hear a lot of intuition in an interview and be like, intuition, there. But it's like, I kind of almost can't really get her out of intuition. And it's like when I ask her a question, she immediately takes it broad and applicable to many things. And she's thinking about the finite and infinite, and she's not saying, well, last week I did this, and this is so far away from that. So we know it. I mean, I know introvert and I know intuitive. Like those two things. And I mean, if I hear conflicting information, great. Like I'll take that and go a different direction. But those two things I feel really solid about right now.
I just remembered the original question.
What was it?
It was, how do you make a decision?
Yes.
With the infiniteness and finiteness of the world, of course. Doesn't everybody, but for real, doesn't everybody, is a struggle that I've had in my life. Like, I assume that everybody thinks like this.
I think they do.
Right? And then I go to the grocery store. And then I realize
so
they don't.
What would happen? What would happen if I profiled you and got to the end and I was like, you know what? Actually, you do think very much like other people. Your type is actually the most common type. Here's your cognitive functions, and they're the kind that are just the most common in society. We meet a lot of you, and that's why. Besides like thinking I was crazy, what reaction would you have?
I would want to believe that.
You would.
Yeah.
To feel like. Yes.
Because I'm like, oh, this confirms my experience of reality. But it's because I have I don't know that many other human beings, honestly. So my scope of reality is very limited to like beneath 50 people, probably.
Yeah. And do you feel like you sound almost like a little apologetic about that, but are you, or are you like, and that's kind of how I like it?
That's something I struggle with. Like, I often say I live in a bubble, I live under every way that you can come up with to explain living in isolation. It's something that I've struggled with as a person who is evolving into a larger version of my small self. What was it? We're all large children. Yeah. I say that I'm a baby all the time. All the time. And I believe it to the core of my being. that feeling of disconnect, like I feel like I acknowledge that I'm not connected to what is like reality, the real world that most people are interacting with. I think I acknowledge that on one level, but I also can't help but question it. I'm like, what? I don't want to accept fully that not everybody thinks like this. Because then you make a mistake where you assume that someone doesn't think like this, and they do. And it's painful to them. And that is awful. To have misunderstood someone in a way that I fear being misunderstood. And that I'm usually not, because I stay in a context where people understand me. Or that they're at least interested in trying to understand me. And I think yet ickier to me is when I meet someone and I feel like they don't want to understand themselves. That breaks my heart. It breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what you can run into in the grocery store sometimes.
And when you talk about understanding yourself, or like other people understanding themselves, what does that mean?
Well, it feels gross to say this, but I'm like, it means thinking about things the way that I do. It means thinking about like who you are and why you do things, and like understanding your patterns and understanding why it's worth taking time to understand your patterns. It feels, nothing can make me feel more distanced from a person instantly than them basically stating a pattern of theirs to me, and I acknowledge that they don't know that they've just they've explained to me who they are, and they don't know that they did that.
Can you say that again or explain that?
Yes. So I feel like this happens in grocery stores where you get into a pseudo small talk conversation, and maybe you're talking to someone about their family, because everyone loves to talk about their family. It's safe territory. And they say something about their relationship with like a child or a spouse or whoever, and bring up like a pain point kind of unexpectedly, and they didn't intend to bring up it. They didn't come to the grocery store today to like talk about their life problems, but somehow we've ended up there. And they make a statement like, well, she always does this, and this is just how I am. And I'm like, yeah, you just connected the dots about why there's a pain point. But they don't have that same, like, it's clear to me in their expression and their tone that they don't understand that they didn't make a connection, actually. They just pointed to the two things that in my mind are like, yeah, she says that because you are this way, and you are this way because she says that. And if you guys just said, this is why I always say that, and this is why I think that I am this way, you wouldn't have this problem, like, obviously. But it's not obvious to them. And I just feel like in those moments that, like, I was suddenly in a conversation with someone, and now I'm like watching a train fly by me at breakneck speed into some other place, and that I'm not with them. That person is gone. And then I usually it's like I fold up shop.
Yeah.
And try to move, I go to something else in the conversation, or, like, blissfully they've checked out now and I don't, that's over. And I'll never see them again. Especially if I never go to that grocery store again.
It sounds to me like when it comes down to it, grocery stores are the bottom line problem.
I think it's because I love going grocery shopping. And I just wish that I could go and no one else would be there sometimes.
I'm curious about have you ever tried to help somebody connect the dots?
Not a stranger. I would never do it with a stranger, I don't think. Sometimes I will make a parting remark that's I guess I feel like I have to do it as that's not a blatant you're not connecting these dots. I would never say that to someone, but I'll say some sort of very generic, expanded out, could even not be related direct, or I'll tie it into something that I've experienced, or I'm yeah, or one of those just comforting blanket statements of that's just life, or everybody has someone like that, or I think that you'll figure it out one day. But I'm not gonna help you. And I might be wrong. Maybe I didn't connect the dots right and there's more information that I need. Yeah. And I think that's part of why I don't do it, because I'm I'm not ready to sit down with you and we're not going to share our life stories, which I feel is a prerequisite to me giving you any sort of advice. I don't want to give advice. It feels very uncomfortable to me because I can't advise myself. I can't calibrate to figure out my own type. How could I type someone else? That's that same mentality.
So let's pretend it's not you here for a second, and it's your sister, twin sister.
Yeah.
And if I said, Sophia thinks she can't give advice to anybody.
Ooh.
What would she say back?
Well, she would have an answer style similar to mine, where I'm going to start answering your question, and I know that at the end I'm going to be talking about something else, which is what she would do too. And she would say that it's something I've been working on a lot recently, that I have really worked on listening to people complain about things and not saying anything, because it is an impulse. And there's a particular friend who also thinks very similarly to us, who's experiencing a lot of pain in her graduate studies right now. She was also a French major. We actually call her our twinplet, so it's like a triplet and a twin. And yeah, that I feel adequately explains the closeness of our relationship. But as she's been having this very different experience from ours, pursuing her, the thing that we all studied together at the next level of academia, she's been having a lot of also kind of reorienting herself around her identity, and questioning that type of thing, and wild experimentation in her social life, and kind of recalibrating that with who she is. And sometimes she'll bring stuff to us that she's complaining about, and I have that same feeling that I do with a person in the grocery store, where I'm you're not connecting the dots, and this is something that you're very good at, that you can do very well for other people. So then I don't want to tell her to connect a dot. I'm she'll get there when she's ready to get there. That is what I've been working on, that not everybody's ready to we don't connect dots often from a place of fear, I think. At least I might be projecting my own experience onto everyone, sure. As I do. But I often won't connect a dot because that connection is a source of fear for me, or uncomfortableness or pain. And I see that in her, but instead of calling it out, I do that sucks. And I think that that's what she actually needs. She will connect the dots herself if she knows that she has people who are saying, I validate you, that this thing that you've explained is really frustrating, even though I think you're not looking at the full picture. I don't say that part. Yeah. I just say that's frustrating. But it's also been really important to me I think in the past, I might have lied to someone about, like said that's frustrating when I didn't really think it was frustrating. So I only say things that I actually think are true to her. I will do like linguistic gymnastics to make that fit.
It sounds like this is something you've worked on.
Yes, this is something I'm very conscious of right now.
So would it be more natural for you, to just say the truth accidentally and oops, I hurt your feelings, what? Or is it more natural for you to kind of around to avoid a conflict or hurt?
Oh, conflict avoidance is the one thing I'm really good at. That's it. That and writing, I get a lot of feedback that I leave very good love notes. Okay. Conflict avoidance and love notes are my two skills. I put all of my XP into building those two to the highest level.
All right.
And I can't go to grocery stores.
Okay, gotcha. Tell me what is your relationship then with leadership?
Complicated. I've found again and again, and this is frustrating to me, that I will end up accepting leadership positions. It usually would happen in school. Every time, by the time that I made it to senior year, I would have gotten cajoled into being, on student council or on National Honor Society, usually as a secretary, because I would be like, I'll do this, but I am not going to be the president.
Why?
One condition.
Why wouldn't you want to be the president?
Because I would never feel qualified to be the president.
Okay, so you would never, are there people who are really smart people who would say, yes, you are?
Yeah, and I would be like, you're wrong.
And what if they said, yes, you are, do it? Would you maybe?
I would flee. I would run away.
Gotcha.
And I've done that before.
Flee, in what? Flee how?
If I can't do it physically, I'm chained to a chair, I'll do it mentally. And this is something that I say all the time, in just casual conversation. I'll even say this in a grocery store conversation, where if it comes up, the idea of me being captured, I'm like, oh, if I go to jail for peaceful protesting again, I'm like, they won't have me. They'll never have me. They'll have my corporeal form. They'll never have me.
So I'm asking this just to ask it, but is there a part of you that's pretty stubborn?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, pause. Did you see that? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Fun. Do you have any certain causes that you are especially stubborn about?
Yes, I do. Let me search for them. Sometimes they feel arbitrary to me. Even I'm like, why are you being stubborn about this? And I think that I've gained some skill in letting go of stubbornness when I start being like, why are you so? And this is something I work a lot with Hannah on, and we do this together because we're both stubborn. That if we're having some sort of, we are just refusing to see eye to eye, usually it will be about a scheduling thing. Because we share a car, I do freelance work, and she has a regularly scheduled job. So there's a lot of, sometimes there's struggle with me needing to get to her, is this a day where I need to pick you up? Is this a day where, you need to drop me off and then pick me up? So we get into a lot of logistical things where it really matters because this is going to happen. This is actually going to happen. So we have to get this right. Or do we? And we'll start being like, okay, why do you think that we have to do it in this order? And as soon as we start to unpack that, we'll let go of some of the stuff. We'll be like, well, okay, if I'm being honest with you, which I try to do, it's because, I actually have this ulterior motivation that's affecting things. So, I had in mind, I want to do it this way because even though I haven't told you this, I was thinking that we might go visit mom this afternoon. So I wanted to make sure that I had the car in order to go get this and that during the day. And as soon as we start to unpack that, we won't be stubborn. But I do, like, I can really buckle down about things that feel very arbitrary to me. I'm like, why am I getting so bent out of shape about, like, whether or not I have the car at 5 o'clock?
So tell me, is it important to you to figure out why you feel the way
Yes.
that you feel?
Yes.
So, but what if you just feel a certain way and you just enjoy feeling that way, or do you not really enjoy it? You want to like understand it.
I immediately thought about D&D and some of my D&D characters through whom I think I've explored this concept and this balance of like these two parts of myself. Like I have like different characters that I'm like, well, this is who I practice this part of myself in, and this is who I practice this part of myself in, because both of those things are inside me.
Yeah.
And what was the question?
I don't care what it was. I want to know how you would answer this question if I asked, do you lead with your head or your heart?
Oh, my heart. I am very passionate sometimes, and that's like I've been focused. Like that is something that people identify as a difference between Hannah and I. They're like, Sophia's she's like the warm, friendly twin. Hannah, people like our friends call her the ice queen.
Okay. And you think you're the same type as each other?
Yes.
So is there an ice queen part of you?
Yes. She actually, the part of her that I think is tied into the Ice Queen behavior, she has like named it and associate it with the character Artemis Fowl from the children's stories. Okay. The part of me that is like, I have a much less firmly, like I see that same part of myself, but I don't have like a very clear identity for it. I have a very clear identity for the part of me that is like friendly and fun to be around.
What is that?
It's Igor, like the mad scientist's assistant, because you can tell that it's trying so hard, but it just messes stuff up. Or you'll be like, you're hard to look at, Igor. Like, I really appreciate what you're doing for me, but you are ugly and make me uncomfortable. And I think that Hannah, like we both kind of adopt each other's, like Hannah will refer to her Igor sometimes, and I'll be like, yeah, I think this is my Artemis, but like my Artemis fowl is not as clearly defined as Hannah's. And
so, and up until now, I've been trying really hard to be, not trying hard, I like to be kind of conversational in my profiling, but we're getting a little bit short on time. So I'm gonna start like not being super conversational and just being like, bah, bah. Okay, if I need to. I want to know, are you naturally are you almost too accepting to a fault of people, and it's like, you just forgive them before they even hurt you, or are there some things that are very hard for you to forgive? Have you ever held a grudge?
I wouldn't use the word grudge. I wouldn't use the word grudge, but I will hold on to things, and I think what I do is I make it mine. I will turn it around and find the ways that it was not, because I can't control another person. I can control me and my experience. So I had a bad experience with a relationship like 6 years ago. I haven't had another relationship since then until recently, and it pretty much took me like most of that time to process it. And what I was doing is letting go of the feelings of hurt that I had, that I felt were inflicted upon me, and trying to find like, what did I do that allowed this to happen? Mm-hmm. And what do I do with it? Like it's mine now. That hurt, I have to either accept it or let go of it.
Yeah. And thank you. Do you do you spend a lot of time? Does it take you a lot of time to process your feelings? It sounds like.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I've been really focused on, like, radical honesty has emerged as something that I wanted to work on for myself personally and bring to my relationships, because I finally felt like I was doing a good enough job with it internally that I wanted to share it with, I felt comfortable bringing it to other people. And mostly it's being honest about my feelings, not about like calling things out in other people. That's not as interesting to me. But like sharing with them truly what I'm experiencing instead of lying or not saying anything, which are usually what I would do, or running away.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was like, here is a list of things that I have energy for. Here is a list of things I don't have energy for. And I recently had a fumbling, I was getting back into forming relationships, and I used my algorithm, and I did, like, part of what that was explaining my algorithm to the other person, and they shut down hard, did not want to hear it, did not want to talk about it. I think I scared them to the core of their being and provoked an extreme reaction of fear and pain in them that made me cry in their presence for like an hour.
Wow.
We sat and watched Critical Role, and I cried for half of it.
How does it feel for you to cry in front of other people?
It's not very hard for me because I cried so much as a child. I cried all the time. All the time. And there are certain movies that I will cry every time I watch it, or like episodes of a TV show, and I know I will, and it doesn't matter how prepared I am, it's gonna happen. And I sometimes I don't dislike crying. I enjoy it. It's a very good feeling for me. But so with all of this tying into I've just recently been focusing on this piece of radical honesty. And as a result, I'm funneling back towards the origins of this line of thought. What was it? Do you remember the origins?
Not necessarily.
You can go back there.
I don't remember.
I can't remember what triggered my memory.
But everything you're telling me is interesting and relevant.
So I think that my behavior has altered slightly in this regard, because I'm focusing more on that piece and being brave enough to be like, this is what I'm feeling. And what feels vulnerable about that is that it's like, this is what I'm feeling is the information that I withhold from people to feel powerful. Because I can get them to tell me more and more about how they're feeling, but they'll have no idea what's going on for me. And that is like masochistically awesome.
So you like feeling powerful?
Only in that way.
Only in the way of?
Only in the way of by holding cards tight, by withholding things that could be powerful to other people, by making tools that they could use inaccessible to them. I don't like feeling powerful in the sense of like, I'm going to get up and tell you guys what to do.
Yeah.
That feels like, that's not how I do things. I would feel like acting. Like it would be funny to me. It wouldn't be genuine.
Do you have an instinct for who has the power kind of at all times almost? So let's say you and I, after this, went down and had lunch somewhere. Would you know kind of like who should be the one to walk in the door first?
Not me. That's all I know. I will wait and watch. Actually, it reminds me of when you asked me about like being a student and determining what expectations were, I would want to watch. I would have to watch for a while to discern I would figure it out, I think, probably. But the other thing is that everyone is more powerful than me. I assume that. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. I assume that you are more powerful than me in some way, which is why I think I have to use that. I'm like, this is my only defense. This is all I've got. Is to withhold my own personal PowerPoints. Because information is power. Yeah. And that's what I'm keeping from them. If I can obscure their understanding of me, then I feel safe. Like nothing they say will actually hurt me because I'm like, like I can let go of it. It's not me.
Yeah.
And I say that would be nice in theory. It's not always how it plays out in practice. Sometimes a incorrect, something that isn't true about me will still get stuck in there because I'm like, is that true about me? And I have to like really dig deep. I have to go through all the, like pull out all the files and lay them out. And then I start, like reading something irrelevant in these files and I'm off to a different, I'm like, wait, I'm like, oh wait, what were we working on here?
Yes. All right, so I want to know, when you were back in school, how hard was it for you to like turn in things on time and?
Not hard.
Not hard?
No.
What about like just keeping track of your stuff?
Not really hard.
Yeah.
And if I lose something, I hate it.
Yeah.
It is infuriating, and I will shut down until I can be like, okay, go back through the whole process and figure out where you left this. It helps to have a twin to do this with.
Is it fun? Is there a part of you that just really kind of enjoys like the adventure of breaking things and having things be like, whoa, that was unexpected, or that was kind of weird and quirky, or do you really like to know what to expect? The security of that.
I do like to know what to expect, which I think that I lose sight because I like watching other people break things. I love that. I love watching other people break things. I don't like doing it myself. Or like I like to watch other people experiment, and then I know what's expected.
Yeah.
And I can just go on in, and I don't have to do their whole experience of like all that energy that they wasted. I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
I can just take their results and try that myself. And that doesn't always work. Like sometimes their solution doesn't land well when I try to do it, but
yeah. Very interesting. So I feel like for me, that just gave me, I feel like I have the answer now. And also when I feel like I have the answer, I'm always like, good, I'm only a few questions away, because once I have the answer, I check again, and then I check again, and then I check again, because I don't like going through and like the rapport. It breaks the rapport if I'm sitting there going like the whole time, and then at the very end I'm like, so I think you're such and such type, and she's like, you didn't understand me. Like, and I'm not saying if you make a mistake and you get the type wrong, that's bad. It's hard. There's like a lot of learning that takes place and a lot of work to it. But I feel like I'm in rapport with her, and I'm loving talking to her. I don't want to slap a type on her and not have it feel right to her. So I'm just going to ask a couple more questions. Okay?
Oh yeah.
All right. Oh yeah.
I'll stay. We'll do this forever.
Okay.
Even if we were just staring into each other's eyes as we discussed.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. That is a fun exercise. I'm curious about whether other people surprise you very often, or whether you're like for example, let's say somebody tells you, do you remember that certification coach, Melissa? Guess what? It turns out she joined the circus. Like she left her family, joined the she's in Cirque du Soleil now.
I think that usually my response to that type of thing would be, oh, that's so cool. And then I'd think about, like, I immediately start finding reasons that it makes sense to me. Immediately, like, there's a beat of like, huh. And then I, like, almost instantly and without me, like, I don't have to consciously be like, begin the process of justifying this. It just kicks in. Like, I will immediately try to contextualize a new piece of information about a person.
And are you very often shocked, like, what? Or is there a part of you that's like, no, actually I could tell that Melissa, the certification coach, is sort of artsy, and she seems like she was getting kind of burned out with her family, so, Would you sort of like have an instinct, like, yeah, actually that could happen with that person?
Yes, and I have, like, this has been coming up a lot for me recently, and Hannah and I have a metaphor for it, which is that we're like, I had the picture frame, but I didn't have the full picture painted in yet. So when I get that piece of information, like I had the right frame and some of the picture, I just didn't have it fully fleshed out yet. So it feels like what we say, and I think that this might just be a limitation of language. We were like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. But I didn't before. If you had asked me before, is Melissa going to go and join the circus? I wouldn't have said yes with any certainty. But when I get that information, I can be like, yep, that I had the frame, and I can see that how that fits into the picture.
Yes. Yes. Do you ever feel like you absorb other people's emotion?
That is one of the, I know what this is about. That's a challenge for me to parse out in myself because I have like another body that I'm basically used to inhabiting.
Yeah.
And I know all of the emotions going there, but not always. But if something is wrong, I know that. So I feel like energy that I have that would be towards knowing other people's emotions gets like drawn into that gravity well of my, like the person who I'm most interested in, and like the person who it really matters if I know their emotions or not. I almost wouldn't say that in experiences I can think of where I would say fall into the category of like, I've known someone's emotions. It's not really emotions that I feel like I know. It's a suspicion of a pattern that might start transpiring. It's like conditions that could result in an emotion. Like I'll have an awareness, and sometimes I feel this really strongly. And I will, I've done things before where I have gone a different path to a destination that I'm trying to get to because I saw someone and I was like, I feel like there are conditions in place here that could result in something that feels dangerous to me. And that doesn't necessarily mean like, I think that person's gonna attack me. It could have been something completely different, but I'm just like, I do not need to walk by that person right now. And I've known that, you couldn't have convinced me that I was being irrational. I would have been like, no.
Yeah.
Stubbornly.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I feel like I know your type.
Here's the thing. So Melissa just took on a very difficult case because you've been how long have you been in profile training? Since this summer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you've been studying the core content, all right? And I'm assuming that you've consumed all of it. You've been here, you've done embodiment exercises, you still have big question marks in your head, right? And so whenever you're profiling somebody who has awareness and has information on their side and still is having challenges and trouble, that's actually more difficult than somebody who has no idea what's going on.
Totally.
Right? Because they're trying to not have their biases in this situation, right? Like they're trying to come from a place of ignorance when they're not, right? And at the same time, she has enough familiarity so that she's going to know the kinds of questions Melissa is asking, and so it's almost like Sophia has to embody something she's not just to be able to show up authentically. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's tough. It's a really tough case. So Melissa has taken on a very difficult case. I also believe that you would probably do with some post-processing.
Oh, I would, and also, if this was a real thing, I would talk to her for another half hour at least before I made a conclusion.
Exactly.
I feel pressured.
Yeah, well, and that's the challenge too. The challenge too is that there's a time pressure, which is not fair, right? To you.
Yeah.
So basically what's probably going to happen is similar to my conversation with Riva, right? My conversation with Riva where it's like, time out, guys, we're going to have to do a take two, right? Because sometimes you don't just get it right away. Sometimes it takes some conversation and post-processing. So I think what would be fair is would you be willing to continue the conversation
Please
during lunch?
let us. Yeah.
You guys are gonna, they're gonna
Yeah.
keep this conversation going. And then you guys can talk amongst yourself, observe what you saw, and then I have a feeling you'll come back and have something a little bit more established.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, did you see the masterful job that she just did in profiling? Thank you so much for being an amazing subject, all right? And so what we're gonna do, Well, and I don't know this to be true, but people are probably standing and applauding because I don't know if I've heard anybody as articulate as you in a very long time. Like, you are a crazy articulate person. Yeah, okay, just crawl in on yourself, but just receive the compliment because I
Okay, can do it.
right? I don't usually tell people things like that just because I think it's cool. No, like seriously, you're crazy articulate, right? It's a joy. Yeah, it's a joy. Everybody's riveted. I was riveted. Yeah. I was just looking around the faces. I actually felt like an asshole for having to come up and end this because we got to get to step in, right? But this was amazing. So thank you so much for showing up the way you showed up, articulate, beautiful. Thank you. And Melissa, thank you so much for doing a gorgeous job. You can see about 500 profiling sessions in there, right?
Okay, so we're gonna pause right here for this right now, and we're gonna shoot into another video. In the next video, we're gonna come back and talk more about Sophia's type and what Melissa's determining to be Sophia's type live on the stage in the next video, so stay tuned.